are allocated to be spent on just improving safety across roadway networks, whether through planning or through construction efforts. It's what $1 billion is available over 5 years, hence the $5 billion. That started in 2022 and I believe runs through 2026 or 2026. The city has interacted with this program in a number of ways in recent years. One is in 2023, we were awarded $9.6 million for the Butler Avenue complete street conversion, which you may be familiar with. We'll be discussing in some level of detail later on in this meeting. So ultimately, we are looking to go back to the Safe Streets for All for another project. This one is going to be a supplemental planning effort, and ultimately it would give us the funds to create a new section of the ATMP that would be specific for concept plans for priority projects that are outlined within the ATMP. This application will request funding for concept planning, basically concept planning level, early design of, we have outlined 4 different bikeway projects, 3 foot trails, 2 grade separated crossings, so bridges or tunnels for active transportation networks, and 4 crossing warrant studies for enhanced crossings throughout the city. We have roughly calculated that the project will cost around $2 million, and the federal share of that would be $1.6 million. So the grant request is 1.6, and the city would be responsible for covering around $400,000. So ultimately, this is going to be submitted by August 29th. That's when the application window closes for this fiscal year. And so now we are just going to go through the process of reaching out to our stakeholders for letters of support. And I have included a template letter of support that is on the back of your printed out agendas. If you are all comfortable with it and you've had time to take a look, I'm also happy to share my screen and we can kind of just walk through it briefly. So it should be up on your screen now. Are you able to see that?
Yeah.
Great. So it's fairly brief. This is a boilerplate template that gets circulated to all of the stakeholders that we identify, and then they are free to modify it as they see fit. I guess let's just walk through it briefly. I don't know. The first paragraph kind of touches on how it's an amendment to the ATMP. The project is ultimately amend the ATMP to create a conceptual planning section, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I feel like we've touched on most of this. Does anybody have any comments at this time?
What are the 4 bikeway projects?
The 4 bikeway projects are, so it's a bikeway along McConnell Drive that would go from Woodlands Village Boulevard towards NAU campus. The next is, so this would, it could be any number of, any level of improvement from including bike lanes where they aren't, creating a separated cycle track, outfitting intersections with, ped bike specific considerations, etc. So with that in mind, it's McConnell Drive Country Club from Highway 89 towards Oakmont. Additionally, we've identified a number of improvements in what we call the mall area. Maybe Martin can shed a little bit more light on what that includes.
That one it's a connection. If you can think about going out Highway 89 past the mall area, when you get past the mall, like specifically at Marketplace, there's a foots trail on the west side of the road, concrete foots, that essentially ends at Marketplace. There is a series of foots that you can take back toward the Safeway, then down past the theater, and then get onto the Route 66 path. But if you look at that on a map, it introduces a lot of out of direction travel and is not particularly convenient. So we've kind of identified a way to get from the end of that trail, staying on the west side of Highway 89 and going behind those businesses like I think there's a, what's there? A Wendy's and a Chipotle and a Dunkin' Donuts, I think. So getting behind there and then getting onto the trail at Lynch just before it goes under 89 in the tunnel, and then you'll be able to pop out, about a block south, and you're on the Route 66 path. Then you can go into downtown. That's the sound effect
No, that's how you do it.
but it connects those two things. And like you think about all those neighborhoods to the northeast, like Smoke Rise and Trails End, like they have to, or even like out to Donny Park, if you're coming from that way, you have to negotiate through that area. Either, and if you want to stay on the foots, it's kind of that long way around. Or you can get on Highway 9, or you can kind of make your way. There's a way to make, I'm sure people have figured it out, but to kind of go through the back roads to make that connection. So we're trying to make it very formal with proper rights and kind of
More direct.
more direct and more obvious
Yeah.
through that area. So, as Chris mentioned, this is concept planning. So we have a general idea sketched out, but this will give us some very specific ideas about what it would take. Are there utility conflicts? Do we need to acquire right of way? What's the general cost for it? All those kinds of things.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's 3.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that, Martin. And the fourth one is the Milton Bikeway. So we are doubling down on the Milton Bikeway. Hopefully, and I guess another detail.
Oh, we had
of
quit
this-
on Milton.
Never.
No, so another detail on this project is that we are trying to leave a level of, I guess, unspecificity, if that makes sense, because hopefully the ATIP application that I worked on goes through, and it will be used to, generate concept plans for the Milton Bikeway, and the funding that we baked into this application can be reallocated towards a different project. So there's, some fluidity to be able to accomplish as much as we can, project wise, as they're outlined in the ATMP. And these concept plans, in addition to giving us a lot of answers about these projects, are also a great step towards other future funding opportunities that could, if we want to apply for a grant to build one of these, it's great to have a level of design already completed. In a lot of cases, it's a requirement to even apply for construction funds. So that's sort of the, our reasoning there. Are there more questions or comments?
Chris, could you, there's really almost a fifth bikeway, but I think we included under the foot trails. Can you, on Santa Fe is what I'm thinking of. Can you describe that one?
Sure. It sounds a lot like what I believe Valerie was commenting on earlier. Right? Yeah, I think you're all on a very tiny screen for me. So
Yeah, I forgot that we had given it a name already. So thank you.
Right. Yeah, no, it's an exciting opportunity, and that was a component of the previous grant application as well. So hopefully that all goes through and that all gets done in one fell swoop. But that would basically, answer the question that you raised, or the concerns that you raised. It parallels the south side of the BNSF railroad tracks from the existing extent of the Santa Fe Foots Trail, like in the Railroad Springs neighborhood area, and parallels the BNSF railroad towards until it terminates at Milton Road. Eventually, hopefully, at a grade separated crossing that goes over Milton Road to to NAU campus.
There's also gonna be an underpass under the railroad right there within 2 months, I've been told.
Within 2 months of today.
No, I made that up. But I've been told for a long time that it was like right around the corner, but it's happening, it's happening.
Yes, exactly. And that was considered, there's a big connectivity angle to how you write these grant applications, and all of the ongoing projects that we have really add to the legitimacy of the ATIP application. We're really working on connecting our active network, especially through downtown. There's a lot of really good stuff in motion. So hopefully we're fortunate on that one, and all of the ones that we work towards. So would you like a rundown of the other priority locations that we identified? It can be fairly quick.
How do you guys feel about the language of this letter? Have you guys had a chance to kind of look over it? I'd like to approve it while we're in the meeting so that you just have it. Have you guys had a chance to look over the? Yeah.
I mean, it does feel like generic because it's what it is, if we could at least like say what the BAC is, like a little, like,
Yeah.
here's why we matter that we support this.
So, something to the effect of, as an advisory committee to the city council, the bicycle advisory committee is pleased to join in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. The more, tailored that they can be, the better, I would say. And Daniel, I'll talk to you specifically, Mr. Chair, at this point, because if people are comfortable, I can write in, something more specific to the BAC and share it with you. And then if you are comfortable with it, you could sign it, or please also feel free to, type something up, change this how you see fit and return it to us. But whatever is easy.
The one thing that I liked was the part about the connectivity of our network and how these projects would move the needle on the connectivity of our bikeways.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good angle to, or, just something that would be important to include.
So I think a sentence about that and a sentence about at the beginning about who we are. And do you guys have any other thoughts besides that?
And then should we change it from I to we?
Yeah, from I to we. Yeah.
We are signed by the chair.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I think we would typically say that, the BAC reviewed the, grant application and voted or made a motion in support of, send this letter or something like that. So it indicates what action you would take as well, if you decide to take an action at the end of this discussion.
I see.
Yeah.
But this letter is is just the chair signature, right? So it's the chair's letter, or is this an entire?
It's the chair's letter, but he's really representing,
Right.
he's signing it on behalf of the BAC. It expresses the BAC's support or motion or whatever it is that you guys do.
Yeah, I would definitely like it better if it said, we offer our strong support for the award of this application. And we are writing in support of the city of, or I am writing on behalf of the.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you to just make sure that the group is represented.
Applicants due at the end of the month, right?
Yeah, before we meet again.
Approve it before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or give Daniel the ability to tweak it as needed.
Mhm.
Yeah. I approve the future letter that exists.
Yeah, right. Well, with those changes, right? I think
Yeah.
we could all approve those changes. We could all approve it now with the understanding that those changes
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wanna do that?
Before we do that, can you, let me make sure I have all three changes.
Sure. The first one we were gonna talk about is changing it from I I am writing it on behalf of the council and that, you know, and then refer to the council a little bit more in there.
Define the council.
Define the council as the number two, what it is and why.
Committee.
Committee, sorry, yeah, committee.
And then connectivity.
And a point of emphasis that this is important to us, because it moves the needle on our bikeways being more of a connected.
Sure. Yeah. Forming necessary connections in the active transportation network.
Good.
Daniel, would you like for me to make those updates and then share it with you, or would you prefer to
Yeah.
do them yourself?
Yeah, go ahead. Don't spend a lot of time on it because I think this is actually really, really close. So if you can just spend about 10 minutes or less and shoot that over, I think it'll be good.
10 minutes or less. Got it.
And do you want my email address?
I have it from the BAC emails, I assume, from the email chain. So I think that we should be set.
Okay.
Make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve this letter of support with the 3 discussed changes.
Second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
All in opposition, say nay. Let's not pull my Robert's rules. The motion passes.
Great. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Chris. Good work on that.
Very exciting.
I appreciate it.
The next item on our agenda is bike parking. Review of bike parking strategies from AEMP and current city code regarding bike parking. Some resources listed here.
This came up at the last meeting. We were talking about, we were generally discussing the status of implementation of the Active Transportation Master Plan, ATMP. And we were had a kind of discussion afterwards about what priorities we wanted to, what other things might be priorities to move forward. And bike parking came up. So I thought there's some information already in the ATMP. I thought I would call that forward and just let you guys know what's in there. I will say that I think there's some good strategies in here, but we really have not made a whole lot of progress moving any of these forward. So if you want to talk about which ones are priorities or what might be good next steps, we will certainly take that into consideration. I can't promise that we have the bandwidth to move it forward, but it's much on our radar, and hearing your thoughts about what's important or what looks promising would be very helpful. Sound fair? So I included excerpts from the plan itself. Bike parking is actually addressed in policy 1.3, which all the policies under number 1 have to do with infrastructure, and it simply says ensure the availability of functional bike parking. And if you go to the back of the document, it includes a handful of strategies, things that we might actually do to make that happen. So the first one is in regard to an inventory analysis. So part of it is maintaining an inventory of existing bike parking. And the second part is kind of doing an analysis to see where we're short and where additional bike parking might be helpful. Now, we actually did an inventory of bike parking, but it's a few years old. And it probably needs to be, well, not probably, it does need to be updated. A lot of new development has taken place since then. And like I said, it's been a few years. What we could do in that case is reach out to NAU. It was an NAU student who helped us with it last time, and she basically went around to all over the city and identified where there's public bike parking, took a picture of it,
That's awesome.
got GPS coordinates for it. Identified it as to what style it was, did an assessment of its functionality, like it was against a wall. Did something else about it, make it non-functional. It was a really great inventory. I don't want to say how long ago this was, but she used, when she did this clipboard, like a GPS device, a digital camera. And I think those were the three things, and all of those things now can be done with your phone really quickly.
So it was long enough ago that it.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So if we do it again, I think, there's better technology we can do. An ArcGIS collector app will take that picture, you can fill in all the information right there. It'll be really.
Oh, we could use her work as a starting point at least.
Yes, yeah, I think so. So the next inventory would just be to kind of fill in.
Fill in and make sure that what she's got, yeah. That's awesome.
Well, and I'd like to, if we're gonna do that, I wonder if some of that data could be put into Google Maps or something. So you could have I've been trying to use Google Maps a lot for driving around town to see how it's handling, how is Google handling bike paths for people, right? So.
Yeah,
Because that's, right, for example, when we talk about that spot by the mall, if you're at KOA and you say, I wanna go downtown, it encourages you to go on 180 in that stretch, because it's the only way it knows to go, right? So,
Even if you put in like that you're doing it by bike.
yeah, if you put in by bike, because it doesn't have a path to go, so it gives you that 180 to do it, right? But as I think about it, I'm like, when we're working on some of those plans, there could be some really good, ways to plug it into.
No, my understanding is if you plug it into Google Maps and you go a different way,
Yeah,
Google Maps will then say, hey, that took him 3 minutes less time than my way.
right, and it'll record it.
And it will record that as an actual route for somebody to go on. The next time you plug
Longer
it in.
but safer.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, that's,
But what I was thinking is, I know if you do parking on Google Maps, there's a whole bunch of parking that you can do. So I wondered if there'd be a way, when we talk about bike parking around these places, if we could not only record it, but also think about how could we add it to Google Maps so that you could be, okay, I'm going to Safeway or somewhere, where's the parking?
I think that's what the majority of people use. Do you guys use Google Maps when you're riding your bike at all?
I've heard Apple Maps can be better for biking.
Is it?
I haven't seen that myself because I generally just
Yeah, I know where.
know where
I'm going to
I know where I'm
work, so-
going. But I also use GPS apps like Gaia a lot for route planning, like looking at urban trail stuff to like make myself little rides. So, and I know it's really easy to import like GPX files to stuff like that or like waypoints. So I've done that before and it's really nice. I know probably not everybody uses that, but
And then there's Strava too,
Strava.
which has heat maps.
right.
So that's nice to know, like what you can figure out where most people are going. It kind of,
Okay.
will lots of times tell you the safest way.
Okay, that's nice.
Yeah, I guess
But
that's
when I
all I
was-
was getting at was if we were, while we're doing that, right, if we knew format, we could load those parking, almost all of those, right? We could just give them that data.
do they have places where you can turn on? Like, is there a layer within those
Like within,
platforms that?
yeah, within Google Maps, there's a
Like
layer all in that, but I don't know. That's what I was wondering. I thought, well, great, if we're gonna get that data.
So is this something we would encourage another NAU student to take on?
Unlimited source of free labor, right?
That sounds like a cool like if I was still in school, that'd be awesome project.
I think there's a handful of ways we can share that information.
Right.
Our GIS allows you to publish,
Mhm.
maps that people can use.
Right.
Awesome. Google Maps allows you to, and even if it's not directly part of their information, you can add information on top of it that could include that. I don't know about the other ones so much. I think if that's possible, you could provide people with KML files or GPX files, and they could, whatever they want to do with it, they could do with it. So yeah, I think there's some opportunities that we can definitely explore.
It's a really cool idea. Yeah.
Students tend to be more on the leading edge of like work
Yeah.
out there. Okay, move on. A couple of strategies related to our requirements in the zoning code. The first one is to do a review of our current standards for minimum applicability thresholds. In other words, when the requirement to add bike parking is triggered, how many spaces we required, and can we offer incentives if people provide more than just standard racks? Enhanced bike parking might include anything that's covered at a very basic level. It could be bike lockers, which facilitate more long-term bike storage. It could be indoor parking, like a set-aside bike room, for example.
So I think kind of related, I was wondering last meeting, it was on the agenda. I don't think we quite got around to the changes in like engineering codes, but I think this might be under that or zoning, maybe more zoning codes, but I was curious if there was any plans or like possibility that we'd see a change to like automobile parking minimums. And if there were, like how that might affect how minimum bike parking is calculated, because I think it's set at like 5%. So if like you have less, if you change minimum parking, which I support for cars, like how, I mean, I don't know if that would, yeah, how that might be affected.
Yes, I think there's a possibility that will get discussed. I think the general terminology for it is parking reform. So
Sure.
There's a handful of things you can do to change how the city requires parking. Getting rid of minimums is definitely a possibility. If that happened, because bike parking is based on minimum vehicle parking, we would have to change that. We'd have to come up with a different way.
Yeah, I just think back to like when how getting on the ballot was calculated last like election cycle and had all these surplus of voters
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
people couldn't get signatures. So it's like a
Right,
similar
yeah, it's
relationship.
widely, like depending on
Yeah.
how many people turned up for the last.
So yeah, if there was a change to parking, yeah, I think just being on top of how bike parking is calculated. Something to think about.
Yeah, and I think just for our purposes, like in an immediate sense.
Yeah.
I have some information a little bit further down, about the specific zoning code requirements. Right now, it's 5% of vehicular parking. So another way to look at that is that if 5% of trips are made by bicycle, then theoretically, all those spots would be taken because it's 5% of the vehicular demand. It's been dropping unfortunately, but we typically run a little bit higher than 5% of all trips. It might be around that or less. Our aspirations are certainly that more than 5% of trips will be made by bicycle. So if we want 10% of trips to be made by bike, is 5% the appropriate number, or do we need to think about providing end of trip facilities for all the people who want to make that trip by bike? We don't have to have an answer for that now.
Yeah,
I think that.
sure. I'm also just curious if people have seen that reflected anywhere. Like, is that 5% actually met most places? I mean, does that
Like in
apply
other
to any,
communities?
does that apply to, just wondering, is that apply, like the grocery store, like
Oh,
Pride or
interesting.
something?
Yeah.
Do they
Like,
already count their customers and go, how many parking spots do we have at this?
Well, yeah, I think I'm just thinking like the fries on Route 66.
It'd be
I think they
interesting.
have like for spots or
Right.
bikes.
And they've doubled their parking, right? That 4 spot was there when there was a gas station there, not a gas station, so
Yeah.
they've
So,
doubled.
I'm wondering if that even actually.
That bike rack at Fry's is non-functional, so like when I park my bike there, I take up the whole thing.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So it's one bike. Second one is, really, if you look at what our current standards, it is intended for short-term bike parking. So like you go to the store, you run in and you come out. Uh, Other uses like in employment, offices, or multifamily residential, bike parking is really long-term bike storage. So like in the case of residential, this is where people would keep their bikes. So imagine like if you lived in an apartment, the only place to keep a bike was a rack outside, it's gonna be in the elements year round, and that is not a great way to store your bike if you want people to use their bikes regularly. Similar with office areas, if the storage is more oriented toward long-term, for example, bike lockers, or if you can bring your bike inside, you feel better about leaving your bike for 8 hours or 10 hours or however you're at morning work versus a short-term situation where you're not going to be in and out of the store relatively quickly. So they're really different types of bike parking for those uses. And in the current zoning code, that's not really acknowledged. Like we often make recommendations for multi-family housing. Think about bike storage for your residents, but we have no ordinance or standards to require that. I should mention, I guess we'll talk about this a little bit later when we look at the zoning code, but there are long-term standards for high occupancy housing developments, which were drafted and intended for like student housing projects, basically. So if you look at some of the student housing projects, they have fairly healthy indoor parking, bike parking areas. It's pretty easy to do if you have a parking garage to accommodate that. Those are required, but that is a very specific subset of multifamily housing that doesn't come up all that often. So the idea would be to expand it to include more multifamily development. And then the last strategy under the zoning code is related to the idea that the easier we make it for developers to do, like the less they have to think about it, the better the results will be. So I think we're doing better, but sometimes the results are kind of uneven in terms of what we get for bike parking, how it meets our codes or not. So if we can make that a little bit more streamlined, we'll make sure that we get the parking that we want. Other strategies, these are a little bit more random. Flagstaff has a lot of events. Has anybody been to other places at events and seen bike advocacy groups, for example, do valet bike parking?
I've not seen that. Those words don't even look right together.
Well, it's like races where they have like a place where you keep your bike at night and there's security.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
With wristbands, and that's like, there's a number on your bike and a number on your wrist.
Just like valet parking.
Yeah.
For bikes, yeah. I'm here to tell you it is a thing that places do this. A number of years ago at the county fair, they did a thing where you got like free admission if you rode your bike out, and there was valet bike parking. There's a place to store your bike. Somebody did it recently. I think they did it at Earth Day. Sustainability did it. Would that be in April? There are other options too. Like could we, for example, have a fleet of more or less portable bike racks that we could loan out to event organizers. So here we recognize that Wheeler Park or Fox Glen Park or Dorp Park is going to have this event. Most of the whatever bike parking it has is not sufficient for a big event. Here's facilities for 40 spaces or whatever during that event.
I like that. It's a great idea.
I mean, like even the farmers markets sometimes get crowded with bike parking.
Even the farmers market, we used to have like a couple of we had gotten a bunch of bike racks that we distributed around to schools and to city buildings. And there's a time when we had some extra ones and we take them out on Sunday morning for the farmers market, put them in like one of the on-street parking spaces. And we had to have these signs that were mildly threatening, like your bike has to be gone by 12. And sure enough, what happens, there's like, at 12 o'clock, there was like a bike, like somebody left a bike overnight. There it sits and, we ended up, we moved it. It was not easy to move the rack bike parked to it. We managed to get it out of the street at least.
That's funny.
Next one is, I called it a 50-50 bike rack program, and this is where the city basically provides low cost or no cost racks to private locations where we need bike parking. And I think this, it's back to the original one, the inventory, the original strategy with the inventory. So if we identify like big commercial buildings or shopping centers that don't have bike parking, can we target them to be part of the program?
So we would need to do that first to like really kick it,
We
maybe.
could, yeah. It doesn't have to be complicated. I mean,
Hint. Here's a bike rack. Put it somewhere, please.
Yeah. Places do this, but this is not a new idea. I think there's a, legitimate question. Do you want to make it no cost or low cost? Like a lot of places will ask the shopping center to share 50% of the cost. The advantages of that is they have some commitment to it versus if you give them a bike rack, it'll end up next to the dumpster or
If
whatever.
you give them the bike rack, can you have certain like stipulations, like it needs to be in a premier spot, like a covered spot, or?
You can, like a lot of places will have a little agreement that they shouldn't move it. It has to be in a designated spot. If they move or something, it goes back to the city. So there are a couple of things that you could have an agreement for those protections. And then it does, it ideally would take a little bit of monitoring too, like so to go like I said, lots of places do this. It's not a new idea.
What would be-
It's not like a big, super expensive program either. Bike racks are not expensive things.
Right. So like, is that, if we wanted to do something like that, like, do we need to get a grant to do that? Could we find money somewhere?
We could find money.
Okay, cool.
If you get a grant, that makes it kind of a,
It'll
like
be
it's a cool
small,
factor. Yeah.
any grant, but yeah. Okay, so maybe we can find an NAU kid to do a map and we can be like, okay.
Well, or I wondered why couldn't we send a communication or post something like in the paper or something to ask businesses if they need it? So we can have them reach out to us to say, hey, are you a business that needs a bike rack? There's we are looking at helping do that process.
Dear Safeway.
Or,
Yes.
yes.
Advisory Committee has identified your business as one that is very difficult to park at.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Why not?
Yeah.
Like, and then say, are you willing to install a bike rack? If so, let us know and we will share costs with you or whatever.
He's
I
the
think there's a
committee.
background.
Yeah. So is there anyone that like has the capacity on your team right now? Because like clearly we're all very excited about this. So like, does anyone have time to do this? Or is everybody doing other projects? Like,
We're still kind of shaking that out.
yeah, okay,
We still consider Carlton to be new.
okay.
This is fairly new, so we're still kind of shaking that out.
So fist pump over there.
Right.
Ride that as long as you can, buddy.
Really, I think, the student concept can be taken pretty far with that. Like
Yeah.
they can help research, a program, get it kind of set up.
Mhm.
There might be other options. To do
Right.
that. And I think, you were talking about how do you recruit places? We were talking about identifying places in advance and reaching out to them. I think another component of it that may be more typical is like you just have it available so businesses can contact you because they want to participate in the program. I think a third avenue is, have you ever seen information that when you go to a business, they don't have good bike parking, fill out a comment card.
Mm.
So if we like pre-printed comment cards with, the issue with not having bike parking and then a link to here, if you want, here, the city will pay for half of your bike rack. Or whatever. And then people, can be kind of crowdsourced in that way. People who are finding places where that they frequent, that don't have bike parking can help.
So we can like provide that comment card.
Yeah.
I kind of love that. I have a stack of them wherever I go. My kids do not.
I like it too, but I think the most effective would probably be a targeted letter to the CFO of a company or to the president of a company or to the owner of a business saying, dear so-and-so, it's come to our attention that your bike parking is below the standard. We'd like to work with you to bring it up to par on city letterhead. I think that would get the most businesses to say, okay, this is, I don't know who this Martinez is, but I better give him a phone call real quick. This looks officious.
So just like using like the, say like the Sprouts complex as an example, where they have great parking in front of Sprouts.
Right.
But then there's none in front of like Michael's or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I guess just like they don't, I guess you would consider they don't have bike parking because it's like so far away. Or I don't know, like how granular, like, like
Yeah.
focused do we want to be with that or? I don't know.
I think effective bike parking is pretty granular.
Yeah.
Like a few blocks away and it no
Yeah,
longer.
no, I agree. I'm like, I'd rather walk up to a tree than walk like 50.
Why did I agree? Why did I ride my bike here if I'm just gonna have to walk 50?
In those cases, I think it's a question then is, like Michael's or Joanne Fabrics, are they tenants? Is there somebody who owns the building and then it's just a
That's
question of who gets approached,
Mhm.
who's targeted?
Yeah.
That's correct. It would be the manager of the building. You're right.
Okay, keep going forward. This is the last one, I think. And it's the idea of adding, kind of clusters of parking in high demand areas. And of course, we always think of downtown, the south side, and any other major activity centers. At some point, it's moving forward. I don't know when it's gonna happen, but we're gonna put, a cluster of bike parking adjacent to Pay and Take in the front of the parking lot for, CenturyLink or Quest or whoever that is. So all that's worked out. We have funding, we have plans, we have, easement from Quest. It's taken a few years to get to that point, but.
Where that gate is kind of in the back.
Yeah, so if you can think of where Pantake is, the building.
Yeah.
And then where the brick building is, where Quest is, there's a parking lot in between with a chain link fence.
Yes, yes.
So that'll get moved back. That fence will become decorative instead of a chain link fence. And then that area in front of it will have bike parking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is always weird to me that the Pantake is like the most bike friendly business in town and you ride your bike there and it's like, now what am I see people
Put it into the chain.
putting it on the chain link fence, yeah.
Yeah, years ago, bikes were, like, people would put bikes in that tree in front. And that's noteworthy, but it's not like there's some issues with that.
Not good for the tree.
To do that, yeah. And it's, think about Pantake, like if they really have no ability to provide more bike parking on there. They really have no site. They have no off-street parking for vehicles. They have no parking for bikes.
I found a place for a patio. That's pretty creative.
And they did, yeah.
See more of that.
Lots of places do that. There are modular things you can purchase right off the shelf and take one parking space. You just put it in the street
Yeah.
and it's there. It's good. You're good to go.
Yeah, that kind of came about during the pandemic and that was like kind of a positive of the pandemic was that it created all these outdoor spaces.
Surprised we don't have more parklets like that.
Oh. Lieutenant Turley.
Hi, guys. Thank you. Ryan Turley at the police department. Going back to the letter, I know we moved on. I was just thinking, does the committee have authority to write a letter on the city letterhead? think we need to discuss that before any letters are written out to anybody on that, or if it is, just educate me.
All right, we'll check on that.
Because I don't think you're representing the city, you're advising the city council if that, so I don't think we could do that on a city letterhead. You can make your own logo and say you're the advisory committee. Just my initial thoughts off the top of my head.
Oh, that's a good point. If we made it like an official program, then maybe that, like an official city program, then that could be a whole nother thing.
Okay, just my 2 thoughts. Thank you, guys.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. Yeah, I probably agree with that, that we do not have the authority to author letters on city letterhead. But Martin does.
Yeah, this is Estella. I feel like we are a city program. I mean, we're a leg of the city. This isn't like what is it, FBO. So I would say we should be able to put it on the city letterhead.
But we're
Yeah,
not so you're not employed by the city or elected by the city or appointed by other members of the board. I guess that's where my legalese is thinking right now. We probably need to get legal on this.
We are appointed.
Like you can get a pretty simple answer. So.
Yeah. We'll check through it in court.
Right.
Thanks, Lieutenant.
Thank you. I don't want to rain anyone's parade. I was just thinking protect.
That's a good call.
Okay, this was just kind of as much as anything for your information, just so you know what we require at the city level for new development. So these are taken from the current zoning code, and these are all excerpts related to bike parking. So bike parking is applicable to all new development except single family. In some cases of expansions or a change of use, depending on how much you're expanding or how intense the new use is, you can be required to meet bike parking requirements without necessarily building a whole new building. As we talked before, the number of spaces is equivalent to 5% of vehicle parking. There is a 2-space minimum, which if you think about like a U-rack, that's 2 parking spaces. So the minimum is like 1 U-rack. I mean, if like in some cases otherwise, vehicle parking, 5% of vehicle parking would round down to 0.05 bike parking spaces. Then that's not practical. They must be within 50 feet of the main pedestrian entrance. And in cases where there are multiple buildings or entrances, they're distributed across the site. And we do monitor new development as it comes in to make sure that these requirements are met. Some of the things about design, this is really location based, but they need to be in an area that's highly visible, well illuminated, and has frequent pedestrian activity. In some ways it's counterintuitive, but if the bike parking is at the back of the building where it's kind of out of sight, it can be more at risk than someplace where there's a lot of activity. We require it to be mounted on something impervious, concrete, paver, or asphalt. We do allow consideration of other materials, but we need to review them and approve them first. Placement should not interfere with pedestrian movements. So we try to be careful about that. Like if it seems like it's close to a sidewalk, we consider whether a bike parked in it will extend into the sidewalk and block part of it. Now, of course, with more cargo bikes becoming prevalent, it's a whole different level of consideration. If a bike parking is located in a parking lot, they have to be protected somehow from getting hit by cars. And this is the diagram that comes with the zoning code design requirements, and it lists a number of different minimums. Probably the most significant one I would say is this 36 inches minimum between racks. That's really the space that you need to have 2 bikes side by side. If it's tighter than that, it gets really difficult to put 2 in there. And then in that case, each one of those U racks, for example, will only hold 1 bike. So you're cutting your capacity in half. On the rack itself, we require that it allows the frame and one or both wheels to be secured with a standard U-lock. This one is probably the most significant. They have to be designed to support a bicycle frame in two places in a manner that does not cause damage to the wheels, allow the bike to tip over. And we'll go, I think the next slide has like illustrations of different kinds of racks. But when the bike is supported in two places, it's much more stable. When there's only one point of contact between the rack and a bike, it tends to be unstable. So if a bike is locked and somebody bumps it, it may fall over. That can cause damage and other things. If you're loading panniers, for example, and your bike is supported in two places, it's much more stable than if you have it supported one place. You're trying to balance your bike with one hand and put your stuff and your panniers in the other hand. And then the last one is just what it's made of. And none of these, of course, are absolutes. I think anything that's even made of metal, if somebody is determined enough, they can cut it in half. We'll do that on bikes.
So if we got to that point of, having a 50-50 or whatever, we're providing bike racks to businesses, would we encourage a specific kind of rack or like provide resources other than just like, here's the guidelines? I don't know. Because there's a big difference between like a good bike rack and a bad one. So I don't know, like, are we just giving them money to buy a bike rack? Or are we saying, here's a bike rack?
I think that would have to be worked out. I'm not sure what other places do it.
Sure.
I tend to think they may just purchase bike racks.
Yeah.
And even to the point of installing them for people, but that could be part of it. We used to get the Arizona Correctional Industry is an arm of state prisons. Like they used to make bike racks. Like if you look on campus, there's a particular kind of bike rack that they use everywhere. Those were all made by Arizona Correctional Industries. I don't think they make bike racks anymore. And they were like super cheap too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole other discussion. And they were kind of skinny too, so they didn't, like a 36-inch, and they didn't really meet. But they were pretty readily available, so we could identify something like that, get a manufacturer and do it. I think last time we talked about like having high school classes well done.
Oh, that's great.
That might be also a different set of issues too.
Child labor.
We're not going to pay you for this. So here are the two illustrations that show on the left the racks that meet that definition, and on the right the racks that don't.
Wheel-based ones are.
Yeah, so some of the old ones are pretty, obviously, like we call them schoolyard racks. That they're variably called like wheel benders or.
Yeah, can't even fit your tire in there.
Yeah.
Kevin's tires.
I think of all of them, the most surprising and the one that we used for a long time is the wave or the ribbon rack are fairly ubiquitous, but they don't meet the requirement of having 2 points of contact on your bike frame. And so a lot of times you'll see bikes have flopped over and then somebody bumps them.
That's when you like lean it again, you use all three spots for your whole.
Yeah, that happens, right? You just go sideways. Yeah, then you're good. That's all I have for bike parking. We'll see about resources and capacity. I think we've talked about this for a long time. It would be a good thing to.
I know we're not updating the entire building code, but I do feel like the renovations part, like it said, some existing buildings, if they change them or change usage, if buildings are getting like renovation permits, this should be in it. Like I think the Goodwill on 66 by my dry cleaners, they did like a huge renovation and they didn't put any bike parking. I'm so mad. The trees at the dry cleaners.
I don't know how that one fell through the cracks, but when that building was Albertsons, they had bike parking. They had a wave rack. And somehow in the renovation, it was taken
They
out.
lost
and
it.
Replaced, yeah. We can move on to the next item unless anybody else has any last comments or thoughts.
Well, so yeah, this is exciting. This sounds great.
So you want me to move on to old business?
Yeah, old business.
Okay.
Here we go.
So this has been kind of a standing item on the agenda, but we haven't had much time to get into it. For this meeting, I thought maybe just give kind of an introduction. This was generally intended for the benefit of some of the new members and kind of as a reminder for some of the people who've been on before. If you've been on the committee for a while, I think a lot of this will sound familiar. And I apologize for that, but just think of it as a refresher and what we're after. A lot of the elements that we'll talk about in a bikeways plan were included in the active transportation master plan and even in the regional plan. But there seems like there's some benefit to having a standalone document adopted that is very specific to bikeways. What plans are for different streets, both existing and future, and what our expectations are for like new development for bikeways. So although it's going slow, it is our intention to move this document forward along with a Foots master plan to be kind of more specific chapters almost of the ATMP, Active Transportation Master Plan, on those two particular topics. So this presentation, I'll try to go fairly quickly through it, but it would be about the bikeways plan. Our intent is to create a low-stress bikeways network. And if you break out those words individually, bikeways are just simply linear corridors for bike use. Network means that it covers the whole city. It's continuous. And low stress, that means most people would be comfortable riding a bike on it. So that's kind of I think it's to be the tricky part because what that means can vary depending on the character of the roadway. But that's our overall goal. For the comfort part, we follow the separation principle. And what that means is that on streets that are really low speed and low volume, and think of like residential streets, like the streets in neighborhoods, for the most part, it's comfortable riding in the street. We don't need to have any specific facilities. There's so few cars, they're going slow enough. We can coexist. So that covers like 85% of the city, streets like that. Maybe less than that. As you start to increase in speeds and volumes, our traditional approach has always been to provide bike lanes. So this is a dedicated space for cyclists within the street. So now you're separated from traffic. You have your own space, but you're really only separated by a white line. As we get a little bit further up in the scale of traffic speeds and volumes, providing a buffer between the travel lane and the bike lane may be helpful. Again, this is not a physical barrier, but it is a horizontal barrier between where cars are and where bikes operate. And then when we get up into the highest level, the most speed, the highest speeds and the most volume, most cyclists are not comfortable in bike lanes on the street. We need to provide something additional to that. And this is becoming more common across the country. This is really how our Foots network works. People like to ride on foots along busy streets because they don't have to be in the street. You're completely separated from cars by some version of a physical barrier. It relates to 4 types of cyclists. again, I think people who've been on the committee have seen this probably umpteen times. This was developed in Portland, kind of as an idea, and then subsequently empirically tested and found to be, fairly on. But we divide the world, all people, into 4 categories. And at the very bottom end is 33% don't ride a bike for whatever reason. No way, no how. We don't judge. At the other end, you've got less than 1% are considered strong and fearless. And no matter what the facilities are or lack of them, they're comfortable riding in traffic. These are people who are really hardcore. And I think they appreciate things like bike lanes, but they don't necessarily always need them. They're gonna ride regardless. Below that, about 7% is enthused and confident, who are they're more advanced. They're not quite so strong and fearless. I think they would much prefer to ride in bike lanes if they're available. And then that leaves the 60%. That's called interested but concerned. And often in our discussions here, we just shorthand that to the 60% of cyclists. And that's really where the action is for what we are working on. Like if you think about the 7% and less than 1%, we've already got them hooked. They're bike riders, regardless of what we do. If we work on making facilities more comfortable, if we work on making networks that connect and provide access to destinations, you get more of the 60% interested but concerned. They need to be convinced that bike riding is okay. They need some additional support to get them on their bikes, but they want to, they're willing to, they're interested. They're not sure about it.
Yeah, I feel like there's people who are, well, a lot of people who are maybe strong and concerned. When you've had enough friends like hit
Yeah.
by cars, you're kind of reluctant to.
There probably is a strategy, like you don't want to lose any of the 7% of the time. That's how.
Well, until, that what we're doing great stuff here, but until all of these, there's a full network, right? You're actually teaching people to be strong and fearless because the roads aren't available to allow them to be 60. So they're actually, like myself included, right? I am much more strong and fearless than I was a year ago because you have to be.
Yeah.
Because
And I feel like
the
over
network's
time,
not available.
I've
right?
become more concerned because
Right.
Well, you don't
I mean,
want to push
Flagstaff's a
them to
little-
the 33%.
No, exactly.
You know?
But,
Yeah.
but so you're absolutely right. We work towards the 60 as that goal sounds wonderful, right? If that network is there, you're absolutely right. I think it's a great, great goal to be at, right?
People shouldn't have to be strong and fearless.
Right, yeah.
It is partially a numbers game as well, because you look at 60% of the population that falls into that category. So if you can convince some percentage of that 60% to ride a bike, now we're making a big dent in, a big difference in mode share.
Oh, completely. Yeah.
And this becomes noticeable.
Yeah. And like you said, that, what was it, you're trying to get the move from silver to gold in that, right? I mean, it all kind of works it.
At an individual level, people actually do, because they're interested and concerned, they start to ride. They can graduate as enthused and confident. Well, lots of people do. So maybe over time, that 7% becomes 15%.
And at an individual level, the more of the 60% that decide I'm gonna try it during the May bike to work week,
Right.
let's say. And then they get out there and they go, oh dang, I think I know that guy. Oh yeah, I used to work with him. Oh look, there's a lady from the grocery store and we're all on our bikes and it's cool. And it's like, okay, we didn't die. And then as you get into June, if they've done it a few times, it's interesting, American adults are so routine oriented. Like, once you get into a routine of going and putting your bike helmet on and putting your coffee in your bag and getting your bike out and riding it, it's like, that's what you do. You do it every day. People would do things, the same thing every single day. So if you get people doing it, it'll turn into a thing.
Yeah, and I think if people don't have to be concerned, they're gonna do it. That's a big
Yeah.
barrier.
Yeah, I think this is the difference between, providing safety and
Right.
comfort. And of course, we want to provide safety, but safety is a fairly low bar when it comes to it. It means that you can survive bicycling, and really, for people to do it, they have to enjoy cycling. So like you rode to work, and if you survived, you by the end of the week, you may not do it anymore, but if you really enjoyed it, if you find it comfortable, you'll do it. I also think that like what you're talking about, there's a role for e-bikes. We are creatures of momentum, and in Flagstaff, we have what in abundance? Hills and wind. And if that is a thing that discourages people from taking a trip by bike, e-bikes wipe that out. Don't even think about it.
Yeah, it's funny, it's misleading, but I saw there was a medical study that's declaring that e-bikes are healthier than regular bikes nowadays. And the main goal is that
Interesting.
people ride it more, right? So people with e-bikes ride them more because they don't, oh, I don't want to go to work all covered in sweat. Well, you don't get covered in sweat.
That's a super good point, yeah.
Especially when your battery
Article,
dies.
right? I think
Heavy thing across it.
It's an interesting article because I was like, I don't know if I believe the stats, like it was, but it was still an interesting.
Okay, moving on. A couple other things about the bikeway plan. We've divided things into a hierarchy of 3 different levels. So at the highest level, our primary network are the things that really give you access all the way across town. So therefore, like hardcore commuting from Smoke Rise to NAU. Or longer distance, they're the main routes. Secondary is somewhere in between, so you're getting from neighborhood to neighborhood. And then third level is like getting from within your neighborhood out to one of the higher level. And if we think about that in map terms, here, what's in purple is the primary. What's in orange is the secondary, and then what's in blue is the third level.
And is this where we're at now, or is this where we're going?
A little bit of both. This is really where we're going, though. This is kind of the plan. So we don't see here what's existing and what's planned. That could be an overlay, and then even within what's existing, like in some cases, there may be an existing bike lane, but our plan may be to make it a buffer lane.
Just with the primary bikeways, I'm seeing a lot of big intersections along those ways. I don't know, especially on the Route 66 bike path, some of those intersections are very dangerous. And I know like the city doesn't have like a lot of power to do stuff, so it's ADOT or whatever, but
You're talking about West 666?
I'm talking about now like over by Ponderosa Parkway,
Yeah.
66.
Yeah,
Like,
we've had a lot of conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, I just
Intersections are
highlight
part of
that,
it.
yeah.
Like getting across busy roads is definitely part of the plan.
Yeah, I see that's on here, facilities.
Yeah. I think what you'll find, like when we look into detail about like how this gets implemented, is it's really, really ambitious. There's a whole lot of things to do. What actually gets done is going to be kind of a secondary thing, but part of the strategy is to build kind of momentum, like address the things that we can, and kind of the worst of things, like try to close as many gaps as we can. And we're never going to get, the whole thing is never going to be implemented, not in our lifetime, not here. But we'll work on all the things that we can and try to get to sort of a tipping point where the average 60% bicyclist feels comfortable enough on their route wherever they want to go,
And
to not be discouraged.
I guess like, I heard you say earlier that this is not in like a consolidated document right now, or is it going to be a document that resembles something like the ATMP or, yeah,
That's the
like,
idea.
that's the idea.
Yeah, cool. Parts of it are, but probably not enough. Probably needs more detail.
Sure.
So
I
what,
love that map, by the way. I could look at that all day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
this includes future roads as well.
Yeah.
It's very exciting every time I see it. It's-
This one is not there yet. Don't try taking it. A couple of the things that the hierarchy does for us is it gives us clues for implementation. So that the bikeways that are primary, for example, would get prioritized for the ones that we build first. They're the most important. If we're talking about where we would build separated facilities, again, it would be the primary and maybe some of the secondary ones that we would think about that for, because they're the ones that are going to be most important. Kind of the similar theme on down the line for maintenance, snow clearing and sweeping. If we need to prioritize which ones get swept first, for example, let's do the primary routes. Closures and detours. For a third level bikeway, it may be closed and there may be a detour provided. But for a primary, maybe there's accommodation through the construction area for bikes if it's important enough. And then the last thing is for wayfinding. If we set the system up so people recognize by color, by number, by signage, whatever it is, what routes are primary, you know that those routes are the ones that are going to get you across town. Or they're going to be the primary ones for your destination. In terms of facilities, it's divided into 3 different categories. Again, based on that separation principle. So we begin with shared streets, low speed, low volume. Some of the facility types are bike routes and bike boulevards. These really they aren't really facilities, it's more for wayfinding. So if it's a bike route, it may represent the best way to get through your neighborhood out to a high level facility. If you've got, like, think about, I don't know, Ponderosa Trails or a neighborhood like that. You can take any one of the streets, but what are the ones that are most useful for cyclists for getting out? The next layer is dedicated facilities, and these are, again, you're within the roadway, but you have your own space. These are bike lanes and buffered bike lanes, essentially. And then the highest level of facility is separated. We would include foots in these, but we would also do separated bike lanes, as will be built before too long on a number of, as part of new roadway projects. We also have tried to plan for intersections and crossings, and I just listed a couple of the generic categories. Enhanced crossings are just anything that makes the crossing easier. Beacons are where you press the button and the light flashes. There are a couple versions of that. We've talked about that before at this committee, and they don't always work great. Ones for pedestrians don't always work great for bikes.
Right.
Right. Sensing consensus.
Timing is just a little off.
Yeah, and there are versions of those that are specific to bikes or specific to bikes and pets. So they try to accommodate both. So they could be done in a way that is a little bit more accommodating to bikes. Separated intersections are, sometimes they're called Dutch junctions. We're going to build a few of them here before too long, but it keeps bicyclists kind of on the outside of the intersection and out of traffic. So if you can imagine making a left turn as a vehicle, you have to get into the left turn lane when the light is green or it's clear, you proceed as a left turn. And in a protected or separated intersection, you stay around the outside and make that left turn in kind of 2 phases as the lights go, and you never are required to mix with traffic.
Yeah, you kind of get the crosswalk.
Yeah. It doesn't completely address turning traffic that's going to be turning across you, but it helps manage, like it makes it less likely that there will be conflicts with right turning vehicles, for example, just by where they place you and where visibility is and how vehicles are making that right turn.
What they call again, the separated intersections?
Yeah, I think in the common parlance, they're protected intersections. So if you look that up, there are all kinds of examples of it. They're becoming more common in this country. I think they've been used in Europe, like in the Netherlands in particular, for a long time. And we're actually, there's an old federal highways guide from like the early 1960s that has an illustration of protected intersections. And I mean, there they were. That was the answer. And then they went away for, what is that, like 60 years time since. And now they're back again.
I think when I was in DC last year, like there was the bike lane and we didn't have to stop at lights when cars had to stop at lights. Somehow it worked that way, that the bikes kept going through. I can't remember exactly how that.
It could be part of it. It could be, I think, some of these intersections use a lead protected interval for bikes. So like for pedestrians and bikes, the green light comes on first. And then they can go through, and then the green light comes on for cars. That's one of the ways they help manage turning conflicts, because the bikes and pets get a head start.
Yeah.
Could that have been it?
I have to look and see, but it was
Have you
cool.
guys ever been to the North Beach neighborhood in San Francisco? Their intersections have a interesting feature where all the pedestrians and bikes get to just go wherever they want.
Oh, yeah.
Like you can just
Yeah.
walk
What do they-
diagonally
Yeah, what
across
do they
the.
call that? It's a,
Scramble mode.
Is that what it's called?
It's like, yeah,
Kind of the colloquial term is Barnes dance.
yeah, yeah. So everyone's like, go.
Yeah, everyone can, yeah, you don't have to go, you can go diagonally across the intersection.
They have one of those in Prescott.
Do
Yeah,
they?
yeah, that's right.
Square,
That's
yeah.
right. Right downtown there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. But, yeah, it does affect traffic though.
Yeah, all the cars have to wait.
They all have to wait.
Adjacent question to just stuff with the intersections. Are there many like or just cameras at intersections in Flagstaff? Do we have any? Actually,
According to Lieutenant Turley, I don't think any of them work.
I've just seen a lot of people running red lights lately. I don't know if anyone else has seen that.
There are cameras that, for detection,
Yeah,
but none for enforcement. Lieutenant Turley can.
yeah.
Yeah, and the
Yeah,
detection.
there's none for enforcement. It is just detection that is operated by ADOT, not by us or any city entity. Unless, Sam, you can correct me.
Yeah, that was my understanding too.
Oh, that's-
Detection.
That's correct. We're in the process of looking at live feed cameras for the intersections, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, and those cameras are used to make the lights longer real time, right? So they count cars in real time, which then make those lights in green stay longer because they can count the traffic to hold that light longer for all of this. That's what those are. That's what I learned recently.
Seems like there's a really nice camera on Fort Valley when you're going out to the Y, like on Schultz Path Road.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah,
you're the only car you pull up, it turns green for you really quick, it stops everyone else. Very nice.
that's great.
Yeah,
those-
just to clarify that's a whole separate software. So when we do get cameras live, that's one thing. To have a management software for those signals, it's a completely different process. Requires connectivity that we just won't have at all these intersections. Just a heads up, that's not a given when we transition camera systems.
Thanks, Sam.
I feel like those camera systems might not see bicyclists accurately.
Yeah, it-
You know,
Feels like it sees me like maybe 25% of the
Yeah.
time, because I have to hit the button.
right.
Most of the time.
Yeah, my favorite thing is when I'm sitting there waiting for a light and I'm like, okay, I need a car to come so I can cross,
Yeah.
you know?
I know in Salt Lake City, they had, like in the bike lane, there was a sensor in the pavement, so when you would pull up there.
You know, there's some pretty cool things for that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, but it all costs money.
Yeah.
I saw ones where they have those little green squares.
Yep.
So you pull in that one, and this is your left turn, then this one is your straight turn, so then it tells the light where it goes from where you park and where your spot is, so. It's neat stuff.
Lots of technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just the last couple of slides, describe how we want to go about implementation. So kind of our approach. And we want to complete and connect the primary and secondary bikeways to the greatest extent possible. And if necessary, use interim facilities if we can't do the final part. And the more we have kind of a complete network, I think the more likely it will be that people use it, the more likely it will appeal to the 60%. We can't do it everywhere, but if we can build some high visibility, impactful projects, like the conversion of Butler Avenue, I think falls squarely into that category. They tend to be complicated, large, and expensive, so we're not going to do that everywhere, but if we can do it in a few key locations, that helps build that momentum. I know, a lot of places have facilities like this, and I'm always curious, those kinds of facilities tend to get a lot of positive press. But I'm always curious, how much, what percentage of their whole bikeway network is made up of those things that it's not everywhere, right? So how do you kind of capitalize on those strategic locations to make your entire network more functional?
Well, we've talked about, as far as visibility goes, the signage,
Yeah,
because that would be visible across the entire city.
yes, exactly. And I think that relates to the first one that helps connect, it shows how your network is connected.
Yeah, because we're not gonna do all those signs until we have a connected network in place, right?
I think you can do the signs at any time. I don't think you necessarily, I think, the network is never going to be complete. So there's always going to be either gaps or less than ideal
Yeah,
places within it.
well, at least shore up the purple line.
Yeah. Yeah. And minimize those gaps, address the worst of them. And I think over time, I mean, this is kind of the philosophical difference between incrementalism and completion. We don't want to wait till everything's complete because that may never happen, but we're going to build it incrementally and then kind of, capitalize on what we have and, again, try to get to that kind of tipping point where there's enough in place, even if it's not complete, there's enough in place that people can get where they need to go and address the worst of it, address the worst gaps or connectivity issues. A few other things there's, and in the old days, there were bike lanes. That was the beginning and the end of bike facilities. Now there's all kinds of different treatments. We've started, people aren't familiar with them at first, but I think they become accustomed to them. These are used in other communities, regularly, so we're not the first. We used to have 4 levels, but now we just have 3. But if we start to add things like bike lanes and bike routes on lower level bikeways, and it starts to help make the whole system more robust overall. And then to Daniel's point, the last one, pull the whole thing together with signing, provide maps for people, do branding, give out the information, help Google update its maps. So when it routes you, it gives you what we've imagined as the best way to get someplace.
Some of it is really working great. It was really cool to see Google say, in 50 feet, turn left on, this trail. And you're like, that's sweet. But it's kind of fun to do it. I was, trying to see how integrated is our Woods Trail as it relates to the world of what any tourist is going to use or any person's going to use.
And is it different than you would do on your?
Yeah,
I mean-
yeah. Is it a different path than I would take?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll have to do that on my way to work tomorrow.
Yeah, it's kind of fun, right? And it's kind of interesting. So.
Like, get on 66. Wait, what?
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it was like, I was going in and it was like, go on 4th Street. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go left on the 66 trail.
We should maybe
Turn around.
I'll do
Turn
that
around.
for a week of bike riding and then come back and compile the results, where was it good? How accurate was it?
Yeah.
How much of the time?
Yeah.
Well, one thing we didn't talk about earlier is in a lot of instances, it's faster for me to ride my bike.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just is.
Oh, dude.
I mean, it saves me like a lot of time.
And what sort of mood are you in when you arrive to where you're going?
Yeah. Yeah, when you clock in and you're like 3 minutes early instead of like 7 minutes late.
I think, like, we haven't talked much about foot trails as part of the bikeway, but I think that's kind of the role that they play. You think about, if you're limited to streets, okay, how do I get from, my house to my office, or how do I get, to the shopping center? And the foots is kind of a layer that, like, is completely different than that, but sits on top, so. And it doesn't always work, like, some foots follow streets anyway, but some could just go off through, canyons in the forest.
Yeah.
Like, if that provides a way for you to get someplace, and it's like, the roads go like this, but the foot trail goes directly across. It's like a shortcut where there are no cars.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, oh, it's great. It's great. And on the e-bike, it may even be a little longer, but if there's nobody there and you're just like looking at the trees and listening to the birds, man, it's just the best thing ever, right? It's like.
Okay, that's all I had on that. There'll be more. There's an online map that needs to be updated that shows kind of what the plan looks like, or the hierarchy is, and as well as assigning facilities to different roadways. That I'll provide, and there's a bunch of text as well that is this close to being kind of a draft document that we'll pull together. I'm gonna go on to including general business.
Yeah, let's brainstorm some agenda items for the next regular meeting. I thought it worked out real well to have parking on this one. Is there anything that you guys are thinking about? I know for me, I always want more information about, like, how do we really do this stuff? This is like Valerie, I heard you ask earlier, is there anybody to work on this stuff, or do we have money for it? No, those are good questions. And I actually, if there's a way to put something like that on the agenda for next time, as far as just a discussion, a general discussion of the process by which things get done at the city level.
Yeah, or for related to the bike racks specifically, I wonder if we should bring it up next week with the idea of what can we as a committee like do? Like, in other words, can I get homework? Great. Am I gonna be writing the template for a letter, or do we go look at a school, or is it something we can assign to members to say, great, someone look at doing this, or so that we can move the needle?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? That kind of thing. I'd love to talk about how to do that.
Any other hot topics you guys want to discuss next time in a more focused manner?
I remember a couple meetings ago, it was discussed like refreshing paint downtown, where, I don't know.
I like that as an agenda item.
Yeah, paint. And I don't know, I'm also, something that I read in the active transportation master plan that I haven't heard discussed was I think there was a page on opportunities for tactical urbanism, and I have questions about that.
I like it. Put it on there.
Yeah.
Tactical urbanism.
I have thing I have been, one of my passions I've been wanting to work towards, and I think you guys have heard in the past, is when we think about building this network and building a bikeway hierarchy around for that network, trying to work to see if we can make those street lights optimized for bikes around those networks without negatively impacting vehicular traffic, right? And so, for example, on my own, I went to ADOT and reached out related to, there's 3 lights that goes from FAC East on Country Club all the way to Route 66. It's the light that crosses Route 66 or that crosses I-40 on the one way, then also crosses I-40 on the other way, and then is where the Purina plant is. Those lights you had to stop, almost get off your bike, press the button for the crosswalks to happen. And I reached out to ADOT and they've changed those lights so that when the lights turn green, those crosswalks turn on automatically on each end, right? So it turns on, it then counts down, and then you can tell where that light goes on each three of those, right? It has significantly improved the commute on just that path, right? Because I can slow down or speed up depending on where that light is, so I don't have to stop at those lights. I can make one journey directly through to that area, right? I do think it is something we could look at doing on roads, like for example, Route 66, right? There are certain streets, and here's where it gets complicated. If the streets are small enough that the light that it takes to cross, and this is where I can go crazy on the details, but let's say it's a 2-lane road, right? You need 7 seconds to cross that street as a pedestrian, right? Well, if that's the case and that's a path, then we could easily go to the city or someone or the traffic engineers. And when that light turns green, you can put that crosswalk on and then it can let it go for 7 seconds, do the 7-second countdown and go, and it won't affect traffic in any way, shape or form. But if it's a 4-lane, right, then the time it takes to cross that street could impact traffic going on the parallel end, because you're asking that parallel street to stay open long enough for each of those to go, even if there's nobody there. Does that make sense? So it's a little more complicated than just saying they all have to be turned on. But I do think it is something I'd like to talk about
Okay,
in the future. And it doesn't have to be next week, but
no,
just to see if there are, because if we can get some of those done, it just opens up that network, right? It allows you, like what I thought and believe is there are 3 lights. Really, there's 4, but we won't talk about the 4th one right now. There's 3 lights that Fanning, Steve's, there was another, what was the other one? Shoot.
Well, why don't we put it on the agenda for next week?
Okay,
And you get your thoughts
okay,
and you be ready to give us a 10-minute
I will be ready
rundown on,
for sure.
does that work?
Absolutely. I would absolutely love to do that. So.
And I think we can go from there and maybe on an ongoing basis, just kind of chip away at that and wrap our minds around it and
Sounds good.
see if this committee can come up with some advice for our council.
Sounds good. Well, and yeah, perfect.
Stella, you have any for next week?
She had to jump off.
She had to jump off.
Everybody good with that? That's a pretty good list.
Typically at the end of the agenda, we have reports and updates. So anything that we've discussed previously that just needs a little update, or projects that are going on that something's happened with, we usually try to reserve that spot for just quick items. The only one I'll go through this time is we did a smart cycling bike class in June, and we're thinking of doing another one later this summer. The smart cycling is a prelude to what's called the League Cycling Instructor Seminar. That's a weekend-long kind of intensive training course, at the end of which anyone who takes it is certified as a League of American Bicyclists instructor, basically. You can teach their smart cycling curriculum. So I'll reach out to you all with information if anybody's interested. You can do it. Either just take the smart cycling class alone. There's no obligation to go on. Or if you want to become an LCI, League Cycling Instructor, we were thinking of hosting that here in Flagstaff in October. And I think we need a minimum of 8 people signed up. Or
And is it free?
the smart cycling class is free The league cycling instructor, I believe, is $500. There is an opportunity for some scholarships locally, like FBO was sponsoring a few people. But I don't think that's in no way, shape, or form guaranteed. We thought of this in the past as a way of, if we had a number of individuals who were certified as instructors, that we could teach classes more often, or kind of on a regular basis. That was kind of the thought. Also, I think there's just a, benefit to being, kind of well-versed in bicycle law, safe bicycle operation, that sort of thing, for the, the things that we talk about, the work that we do.
And your estimate for that first class, you said late summer, so we were thinking in like the next couple of weeks or?
Toward the end of August, yeah, so,
Okay.
yeah. We did the first class, there were a handful of people who were interested, who were not able to make that particular time. We've typically done it as, it's like an 8-hour class, but we do like a Friday evening and then a Saturday morning. And the Friday evening part is in the classroom. I mean, and then Saturday morning is kind of on bike stuff.
Hey, Martin, can you look at those 2 tunnels and let us know where those are in the process? The one from the farmer's market over to the transfer station and the one under the tracks over by Furniture Barn. Yeah. I'm just curious.
I think it's been a furniture.
I said 2 months. It wasn't true.
I know, but the horse, the cow is still there, right? So you always see the cow.
It's the Nagro.
Three other really quick things. We could have talked about this under election of officers, but in the past, we've gone till 6. Often we go to 6:30. Are you comfortable with one ending time or another? We used to kind of, try to end by 6, but I think probably for the last couple of years, we've more regularly ended by 6:30.
I think we can end at 6, especially, I feel like this meeting in particular was very, very productive. And I feel like if we're gonna, as a group, if we're gonna show up in mass in person like this and we're gonna get through this much information, I think that an hour and a half is a
Okay,
good meeting time. But how do you guys feel?
Well, we went to 6:30 today, so.
Well, that's 4:30 to 6:30, right?
Right, yeah.
So we went 2 hours today.
Right.
But I feel like as one of the first meetings in this new group, that we're only gonna get
So you're thinking the next meetings will be?
hour and a half.
Okay.
I don't know how you guys feel about that, but you're on an hour and a half.
I mean, I would rather go to 2 hours than leave like topics undiscussed, but in general, if I'm here, 6:30 is the same as 6 to me, but.
okay.
I think striding for 6 is a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, right, it allows us to be, and it allows us to say, okay, we have, if we decide we have too much on the agenda, then we can say, oh, this is gonna be a 6:30 one or something.
Also happy to take advantage of the longer days as they are right now, and then
Yeah,
we'll get
true.
shorter and darker and colder. So we can adjust accordingly.
Some time ago, one of the previous chairs of Bike Advisory, like we always aim to end at 6. And he would end the meetings at 6. And I swear sometimes it'd be like, people would be mid-sentence.
Meeting adjourned.
That will be that.
You can finish that thought in a month.
Exactly. Second thing, we have always been fairly informal about protocol. But if there's anything that you want to talk about, like how we conduct our meetings, the number of public present kind of varies, from meeting to meeting sometimes. And like tonight we have nobody. Sometimes we'll have a handful of people. You're too close to the bus to me.
Yeah.
I consider you one of us.
You're not nobody.
And so generally it's been informal and discussions have been fairly informal. And I think that works okay. You know, Robert's rules are really meant for, to run meetings efficiently to make sure they're fair. So if you have a lot of people that want to contribute, that's how you make sure that gets done. I don't think that we have an issue with like people not being heard or with meetings getting unruly or anything like that, even when we keep it informal. But I mean, really, this is, you know, kind of your committee, and we have some flexibility in how informal or how formal we're going to make our procedures and board protocol. Again, you don't need to answer that now, but just think about that. And then the third thing is, we need to appoint somebody to remind me to start the meeting recording at the beginning.
Did you record this one?
I hit it late. I didn't get the very beginning. So somebody has to,
Take that job.
you'll do that? Okay.
That's all in favor.
Susan used to do it. She actually sent me an email right before you.
I forgot.
Oh, that's sweet.
He has left the hole in his committee.
Then your final action is to adjourn.
I'll be back up.
Okay,
There's
Yeah.
there's
yeah, you
consensus
should
to
be the backup,
Just
never
to-
mind.
I'll be the.
Yeah, consensus
The
to
vice,
adjourn.
the vice.
If we have consent. Turn, right?
Yeah.
We have consent.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
See
you
you
all.
next week.
This was wonderful.
Do you need our oaths?
Oh, yeah.
Great job as your first chair.
Well, and I've thought about those Robert's rules because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of